story about being a still alcoholic. I've been sober for a bit, and what scares me, that who would ever say that something that might happen in my life, that thought could go away, and I would be dumb enough to pick up another drink. All of my sobriety would go down the hill, and I would be being true to the alcoholic ways, because that's what we do when we're still using. We still pick up, even though we know it is our death. I still say I'm still an alcoholic. And I always have to say that I'm an addict too, because I can be addicted to anything. I always make jokes about I'm addicted to, besides being addicted to alcohol, I was addicted to food, I was addicted to gambling, I'm addicted to cigarettes, and I will bug cigarettes because I don't want to buy any, because if I do buy one, I'm smoking one after another. So that's what I do when I get into places and I get nervous, I'll want a cigarette. So I'm an addict. And I have always said, if I had a lemon pie sitting in front of me, I wouldn't only eat one piece of lemon pie, I'd eat the whole freaking pie. That's the way my addiction rolls. It's into anything. I am an addict and an alcoholic. Okay, I guess if I'm going to be telling like first step meeting, I'd have to say, I started out stealing cigarettes and beer. Now, I didn't get the beer. My friend got the beer. I got the cigarettes because my mom was a pretty good smoker, so I'd steal the cigarettes, and we'd go out to the edge of the cornfield, and we would drink beer and smoke cigarettes. And I was 10 years old when I started doing that. And I had my friends, their parents drank, so it was easy to get beer from them. And we would do this, stealing of the beer and everything, and about 12 or 13 is when we could go to the movie. And we lived about 3/4 of a mile from town, and so my mom let us walk to the movie, and usually it was still like when the movie was over in sometime, and so we would walk home. So, of course, we'd always get smart and figure out how to get booze. So by 13, I was having major blackouts. I don't remember a lot of stuff. A lot of the night was a blur, because we'd start drinking in the evening, and I didn't know what time I finally staggered home. And I think my mother caught on, because by then I was getting the wax to the back, because I was coming in drunk, or I was trying to sneak in the window in the basement, and she knew it. And that was what they did back then. They didn't spare the rod, that's for sure. That wasn't the way it was. And, you know, I want to give credit to my mom and my dad. They did the best that they knew how as parents, but they were heavy-duty drinkers themselves. And just through the years, they just quit drinking. But, you know, I knew, like I've always said, if you pick up a drink after years, you're still an alcoholic, because it's still it's still the same rush, the same feeling that you get from the very first time you pick up a drink in the beginning. But my mom and my dad, they tried hard, and I know it was a hard thing for them to do, because there was 9 kids in our family, and I'm the oldest of the 9 kids. And I was supposed to be the golden child. I was supposed to be the smartest, the best, and everything. But there was kind of an ugly secret in our house that nobody ever talked about. Nobody. And it still is a hard one for me to say out loud, especially with people I don't know. If I get to know you, then I am who I am, and I feel all good about it. But I was sexually molested when I was a kid. And it's still happening out there, I can say that for sure. That behavior doesn't go away from some people, because that's their addiction, a sexual addiction. So I think my dad looked at me that I was a damaged child. I wasn't good enough. So my sister became the golden girl. She was my next sister, she became the golden girl. And so how did I try to compensate when I was in high school and grade school? I tried to do the best I can, be the smartest that I could. And when people would say, what are you going to be when you grow up? I always said I was going to be a nurse. And I was lucky to fulfill my dream of being a nurse, you know. I was really lucky. But I'm telling you, my life was sort of normal, but give me a drink and all the rest of the shit goes out the door, you know, and I'm back at it. And I would always drink until I was oblivious. I can remember my nose getting warm from the booze, and we drank homemade wine, especially homemade wine. And I can remember sitting there and talking like a normal person. And I would get up to try to take a step and falling flat on my face. That was what homemade wine did to me. I couldn't hold my booze, and I can tell you that for sure. I didn't know how to do that. I drank until I was drunk. And then I still kept drinking. I wasn't the kind that could get up and drink the next day, so I had to go for it all in one night. I remember that, because I do it all in one night and get going. The other thing that really stands out in my life is that by the age of 16 I was pregnant, and I was lucky they let me go back to school that year. So I got to go to school until my belly got too big and I couldn't fit into a desk at school, so then I couldn't go back to school anymore. But I was lucky. I ended up graduating with my class and walking across the stage. And I signed up for nursing school, and nursing school I went that fall. And for some reason, that year that they let me go back to school when I was 16, I actually just stopped drinking. I didn't drink. And then I got married, and on my wedding night, of course, we were all drinking and drunk, and I was getting too drunk, and I know I needed to go to sleep. And we were at my brother-in-law's house, and that's where the party was being held. And I wanted to go to sleep. And so I took my car, and I drove to my mother's house, and then crawled into my bed and went to sleep. Well, the minute I crawled into bed and went to sleep, my sisters, I told you I'm the oldest of a bunch of sisters, they stole my keys and took off with my car. And they must have been riding around all night until it got daylight. And at daylight, thereabouts, I woke up to being smashed in the face. My husband, who had only been my husband less than 24 hours, hit me in the face because he thought I was the one that was driving around my car. And there was guys on there and girls on there, and he thought that I was the one that was doing that. And he laughed after he punched me in the face, and I got up and I knew my nose was broken because I could just feel the crunchiness in my nose. And I went to the hospital. So that morning after my wedding, I remember looking up at that little square thing on the x-ray machine so they could take an x-ray of my nose, and it was broken. I was just lucky it wasn't displaced. And the thought of getting my nose broken, trying to put it back into place, I decided to just leave it. So I was always glad because I wore glasses and nobody could ever see the little ridge on my nose. The next morning, when my mom found out what had happened, back in the day, the story was if you got married, that was your bed, and you stay in that bed because you're the one that made that bed, you're the one that made the choice for that bed. That's the way it is. I got married in the church, which I forgot to mention too, which was really important. Since back in the day, if you got married in the church, then that was a big deal. So I actually stayed in my marriage for like 30-some years, and the fighting and the beatings never really ever went away. way. I used to say that I got beat up as often as I changed my sheets, at least a couple times a week, and if not, maybe once a week. And I raised, because I had made a choice to stay, I raised my kids in that kind of environment. I had 3 children, and they were raised in that fighting, screaming, quarrelsome family life. We could be normal sometimes, go to picnics, take the kids swimming, and do the whole summertime thing. And then you know, we could be okay. But bring out the booze, then the party was on, and the crazy went on. And that's the way it really was. And you got to remember, I didn't quit drinking for the first few years of my my marriage. But then I realized if I would quit drinking, maybe they wouldn't beat me up because I'd be smart enough to leave. Well, that didn't last very long. I still got beat up, but I didn't drink. For 2 whole years, I always said I white-knuckled it. I'd grab on the edge and I would not drink because I was trying to make a point that if you don't drink, then you'll be okay. Well, it was okay to a certain extent for me. He used to say, "What the hell do you think you are? Too good to drink anymore, blah, blah, blah." Or all of that kind of noise from him. And, but I didn't care. At that point, I was feeling kind of proud of myself, not drinking, because my drinking years when I was married, I can remember running away from him, which of course was another beating. But I can remember going to other parties and having the time of my life, laughing, dancing, and singing, and all kinds of stupid stuff, running in and out of ditches. I did a lot of ditch work. I drove the pickup in and out of the ditches. I can also remember they were just putting curb and gutter in Redby. They were making the curbs on the streets. And I can remember running over, boom, boom, over curbs and riding around in Redby. They had tried to have me smoke weed too, but the first night I tried to smoke some weed, I got paranoid and I cried for them to take me home, so they wouldn't dump me off at home so I could have my own paranoia all by myself. But I can remember that really vividly. I can still remember that night and whose house I was at. But I can tell you for a fact that all through my drinking years, my blackouts never went away. They never did. I think once you step across that curb of drinking, it's going to be all lost, because then you have no control over your body, you have no control over yourself, and you have no inkling at all what you ever did. And I think that was what bothered me the most. And so my 2 years of white knuckling and sobriety is what did me good. And I have a couple of stories from my 2 years of white knuckling. And I used to have insomnia really bad, and during my nights of not sleeping, if something happened during the week that I wasn't proud of, or I should have said this, I could have did this, I wanted to do that, blah, blah, blah. You know, just worrying about what people were thinking about me. What did I say? What did I do? You know, because I was so embarrassed over knowing that I was in a blackout and doing different things I shouldn't have been doing. And daylight, just as it's still dark out, and it's just starting to see the slight glimmer of light. The birds, they start singing. They're happy to be alive, the birds. Well, what popped out of my mouth wasn't very good. I said, birds are fucking making noise, and what the hell, they just shut up. You know, they're just disturbing me and my misery over here, just let it go on and on. I would go on about it. It's That was for sure one of my big stories about them. And then my last born son, one day, of course, we were taking a family ride. My husband, we had our 3 kids, and we were going down the road. And we were going through the woods, and it had to be in the spring of the year. That's all I can think. It had to be in the spring when the snow was melting and you could just start to see the woods and stuff really clear. Well, I remember during the winter, I had went by a swamp full of tamarack trees. And I remember, again, looking at the tamarack trees, because they look dead in the winter. They look dead. And I was like, trees, so we should just burn it down. Look at how ugly they look. This is all just going on in my brain, all to myself, you know, holding my son, who's having these rugged, icky thoughts as usual. And a couple weeks later, we went out for another ride, and I happened to notice the tamarack trees. I looked at them, and they were turning lime green. And what happened then was I cried, because I realized that tamarack trees have no life, and I felt in my whole body. That was my dream, and that was because I had crawled out of the pit, just like this story talked about. You don't know that you're in the pit until it hits you that you're lost and you're in a pit. And that's one of the reasons why, how I got to AA. Of course, like I said, we kept on arguing through all of those years, and then one night he was arguing with me, and I thought, well, I had a vehicle of my own by then. And I was said, basically, this shit, I'm going to go to Bemidji and I'm going to go get drunk. Hell with this shit, the sobriety shit, it's not worth it. It's not helping me. I don't know where the good feelings are supposed to come from, but it's not working as far as I was concerned. So I was halfway to Bemidji, and then I went, ding. I had read in the newspaper where they had opened up the Al-Anon Club, the Alano Club, the building where they have AA and Al-Anon. And I decided I would go there. And if I didn't feel any better when I got out of that place, then I would go get drunk. I still had an option to get drunk. Well, anyway, one of my first AA meetings for myself, this is when I went in there for myself. I hadn't drugged my husband. I hadn't begged him to go with me, or anything like that, or I went with somebody else. Once I went to an AA meeting with one of my friends. She was a nurse, and she was a nurse at the treatment center. And I had went with her, but it was, of course, that had nothing to do with me. I wasn't an alcoholic. I could quit any time I wanted to because I had not drank for 2 years. And, you know, if you're saying that alcoholic people have to drink all the time, well, I did that. I haven't drank, so AA didn't mean anything to me. But the night that I stumbled into the AA meeting, this was the part that please don't take offense, but anyway, there was these 3 crusty white guys. I thought they were old crusty white guys. Later on, I found out they were just as old as I was. Whatever. But I told them I had never been to an AA meeting for myself. I'd always went to AA meetings, you know, dragging my husband there, or going with somebody else that wanted to go to an AA meeting. But I had never been there because I thought maybe I should look at my life. You know, it was still miserable, and I still felt like drinking. Yeah. And they sat me down, and we had a meeting, and they told me their worst, darkest secrets. They became vulnerable. And they could cry over their crazy shit. And I couldn't cry over the crazy shit because I was so too ashamed. And I was too full of fear that somebody might not like me, somebody might think I'm not a good person. So I didn't want people to know what I was about and who I was or anything. But anyway, once I stumbled into AA, one of the biggest things I found out, I was home. I felt like AA was a home to me. I was me, exactly who I was. I didn't keep secrets anymore. I didn't need to hide anymore. And I always used to make jokes about going to meetings. When I was getting sober, I got lots of stories about getting sober because I can remember when I was going through the 2 years of white knuckling it, I would look at the clock and couldn't wait until about 9:30 because if I took off to go get a bottle, it was too late. I wouldn't make it to their, end of my sale. So I was okay. Then I would look at the clock again about 12:30 and think, oh, I made it to 12:30. I can't leave for a bar now because I won't get there for last call. And another thing was one of my secrets from my drinking days. How after you've been drinking in the bar and at your table, how there's usually all bottles all over the place? Well, I could be cool. I could drink 1 or 2 drinks for most of the part of the evening. But I have to tell you, when they were saying ready for last call, I was like pouring down, I don't know whose drinks and every drink that was on the table. That's how I knew I was an alcoholic. The more I got, the more I wanted. And that's what I have lots of stories. Matter of fact, my last drunk, I remember we were going out to, I didn't know what was going on at the bar. Maybe they were having a band. So I dressed up and I had a nice tan pants and a tan shirt, and I even had on tan high heels. Awesome. I looked great. I couldn't believe it. So that all sounded good and well, but by the end of the night I was on my hands and knees on the side of my car, puking out my guts. That's how awesome and wonderful it was. Those are another ways you can tell when you're alcoholic, because you can't say no. Even to yourself, you can't say no. Everything about my sobriety had to do with when I walked into AA. It was for myself, nobody else. I actually became a better mother. I used to make promises to my kids and then I would break them all the time. I used to discipline my kids just like I got disciplined, which wasn't very nice. I was not a good person in my younger years. I think I lived for all the wrong reasons, trying to be a decent human being. And one side of that was my out of the house personality, I called it, out of the house personality, and the personality that I stepped into when I got home. Then I became not good, not fun. But when I became a better mother, I used to come home from work and I'd be tired and I'd tell my kids, if you let me sleep for 1 hour, I will take you to the lake. And at 1 hour, the door would push open and I would have these 3 little people looking at me and they were waiting to go to the lake. So one time I told them I would throw together, we would eat at the lake. So we had Kamad mac, Kamad tuna, I had mayonnaise, so we had tuna salad, and I bought chips and I bought Kool-Aid. So we had Kool-Aid, potato chips, and tuna mac salad. But we had a picnic, and my kids thought it was the greatest thing in the world because I had started to become a good mom. I did what I said I was going to do. I learned how to discipline them in the right way. But I always thought it was too late. They had already gotten all the bad part of my parenting. And of course, what they saw their dad do wasn't very good either, so. But I think now, through the years, I sent all my kids to treatment, and I tried to do everything I could to be a great example to them in all these later years, that I finally have come into the point of having forgiven myself. I did the best I could, and that was the only thing in this world that ever meant anything to me. And now that I have a grandma and have all these little grandchildren, my poor kids have been all dragged to AA too. But I want for them what I had a chance to find in the AA program. And I hope for you to stay in recovery, because at the end of your life, you want to say you had a good life. And that's one thing I can say, and I thank you for hearing me out. Thank you.